Before the review begins, we need to cover a few bases here, the first being a content warning. This game's story is heavily about themes of self-isolation, emotional distance, and death. I don't plan on covering any of this stuff in extreme detail, but if those topics are triggering for you, you may want to click away from this video. I have a much happier game planned for next month, so tune in for that. The second thing we have to cover is this game is what some angry nerds might call a walking simulator. I really don't like this term, since I think it implies that because these games lack mechanical depth, they are somehow less of a game than a more traditional game would be. From here on out, I will be referring to these kinds of games as arthouse games, as I feel the common denominator of the genre is actually the artistic experimentation with the medium of games and interactive media as storytelling. These kinds of games attempt to tell complex stories in a way only games can, similar to how arthouse film is more about experimenting with the genre of film as a storytelling mechanism. With all those disclaimers out of the way, let's get into the review. The Space Between is a horror game made by Austrian game developer Christoph Frey. But if you go into this expecting the relatively standard jump-scare-laden experience of the modern game horror genre, you'd probably be pretty disappointed. The Space Between is a slow burn horror much more like the movie Midsummer than, say, Friday the 13th or Nightmare on Elm Street. The buildup of fear is much slower, and at the end there is no easily understood monster like a Freddy or a Jason. Instead, the struggle in The Space Between is much more complex and internal. It comes from someplace inside the mind of the characters and even yourself as the player. And by the end, it's still not totally clear why the events that took place in the game happened. The game opens on an article describing the death of our main character, Martin Mellinson, an architect who's building a new theater for the town. We learn he died somewhere within the walls of the new theater, and someone close to him is suspected. There are only 3 characters in the entire game, and you only ever get to see one of them. We of course have our main character Martin, but there is also Daniel, a close friend of Martin who is always off-screen and behind walls. And the other character is Clara, a woman Martin meets outside an apartment complex one night. Clara is the only character we get to see for ourselves as the player, and she forms a strong relationship with Martin over the course of the game. The story unravels itself slowly from there as we learn about the life of Martin and the walls he builds, both literally and figuratively. I won't spoil any of the plot from here on out, since it wouldn't make much sense for me to tell you to play this game and then tell you everything that happens in it, especially for the kind of game that it is. But the way the game takes the concepts of walls and twists and turns it by the end is fascinating and terrifying in equal parts. The music similarly starts out fairly normal and becomes much more distorted and twisted as the game progresses between the acts. The way the story is told becomes less and less linear as it goes on. All of these aspects work together to create an incredibly uncomfortable and terrifying atmosphere slowly over time. The game gets in your head as you watch the events unfold and try to make sense of it, and you question the reliability of Martin's perspective as it goes on, but the game will give you no such answers by the end. Something that might be unintentionally contributing to the inability to find answers is the way the script is written. The way some characters' dialogue is written comes across as slightly strange to read. Like the often repeated phrase, "Sometimes walls don't have to be out of matter." I don't know for sure, but I think maybe it's possible the developer doesn't speak English as a first language and that's why it sounds weird, but it didn't detract from my experience personally. The strange grammatical structure also might be intentional. The dialogue is often used to present themes to the player rather than sound like direct conversation between 2 people. I actually think it adds to the charm of the game a lot, but I wouldn't blame anyone for saying it didn't work for them because they couldn't get into it. The game also makes really great use of distorted visuals throughout the whole game to disorient the player and make the game a little more confusing and terrifying in places. But some areas at the end of the game got so dark that I had to hug the walls to get anywhere, which made it a little hard to get fully engrossed in the stuff happening. It didn't keep me from enjoying the last act at all, though. I feel like I can say with confidence the game won't be for everyone, given how indirect and at times frustratingly vague it can be with its themes, but you should absolutely give it a try. The Space Between is definitely more of a niche experience that I think a lot of gamers probably won't have had a ton of experience with, even if they've played a lot of indie games before. But at just under 50 minutes to complete and only $6 on itch, it's a great jumping on point to the genre of arthouse games. You definitely owe it to yourself to try it and see if this kind of experimental game is for you. Hey, thanks for watching to the end of the video. If you like the sound of my voice, you should go follow me over on Twitch, where I stream every Monday and Wednesday at 7 p.m. Central Time. Follow me on Twitter for updates on new videos, streams, all that stuff. See you guys next time.